Los Angeles never played fair with people who fell for the wrong ones. The city had a way of chewing up hearts and spitting out consequences, and tonight was no different. He was a mafia boss, feared across every dark corner of California, respected by those who knew better than to cross him, the undisputed king of the underground. She was a judge's daughter, raised on courtroom ethics and Sunday dinners where justice was discussed like gospel, taught to see the world in black and white, right and wrong. They shouldn't have looked at each other that way. Shouldn't have found themselves alone on that balcony overlooking the glittering chaos of downtown LA. And they definitely, absolutely shouldn't have kissed. But they did. And that kiss wasn't just forbidden, it was the kind of mistake that rewrites your entire damn story. The kind you can't take back, can't explain away, can't pretend didn't knock the ground out from under you. From that moment on, he stopped being an untouchable legend and became something far more dangerous. Vulnerable. Because she wasn't just some girl. She knew too much. Saw too much. Understood things she had no business understanding. And that was the night the king of crime started losing his throne. He tried to ignore it. Tried to brush it off like it was nothing, like she was just another face in a city full of faces. But anyone who runs Los Angeles knows the truth. There's no such thing as forgetting here. The streets remember. The walls talk. And secrets? They don't stay buried for long. The mafia doesn't fear guns. Doesn't fear badges or raids or even death. What it fears is someone who knows its ghosts, who's seen behind the curtain, who understands exactly where the bodies are buried. And the judge's daughter? She saw his up close. When someone discovers that kind of truth, there's no going back to normal. No neutral ground. No walking away clean. Either you control the information or it controls you. Either you own the risk or the risk owns you. It's really that simple. And that brutal. If stories like this hit you the way Los Angeles hits the people who dare to feel, don't just watch from the shadows. Stick around. I drop tales that pull the curtain back on forbidden love, power, fear, and the kind of choices that break empires. Every week, we dive deeper into a world where one kiss can burn down a kingdom, where a single secret can make the strongest man bleed. So before the city swallows you and spits you out, hit subscribe. Costs nothing, but it keeps you on the inside where the real stories live. And if this first taste already punched you in the chest, smash like so I know you're one of the few who can handle the truth. Before the kiss, everything was simple. Cling. He gave orders, the world obeyed. That's how it had always been, and that's how he thought it would always stay. Los Angeles belonged to him the way the ocean belongs to the tide. Naturally, inevitably, without question. From the time he was a kid running wild through the streets of East LA, he understood the unwritten rule that governed everything in this city. You don't fall. You make others kneel. And for years, decades even, that's exactly what he did. Built an empire on fear and respect, on loyalty bought with blood and money, on a reputation so heavy it could crush a man just from hearing his name whispered in the wrong room at the wrong time. He was untouchable. A ghost in expensive suits. The kind of man mothers warned their daughters about, the kind politicians pretended didn't exist while secretly taking his calls. But she didn't kneel. Didn't flinch. Didn't look at him like he was a monster or a myth or something to be afraid of. She looked at him like he was just a man. A flawed, complicated, dangerously human man. And maybe that's what did it. Maybe that's what cracked the armor he'd spent his whole life building. The judge's daughter was different from anyone he'd ever met in this world. She didn't fear her father's power. Didn't bow to the system that had raised her. And quietly, almost silently, she didn't fear him either. Not in the way people should. Not in the way that kept them alive. It started small. Innocuous even. A smile that lasted half a second too long. A glance that caught him off guard at some charity gala where men in his line of work went to pretend they were legitimate. The way she stood on that balcony looking out at the city lights like she could see through all the shine and glitter straight to the rot underneath, like she understood that Los Angeles was beautiful and broken in equal measure. She didn't try to charm him. Didn't flirt or play games. She just existed in this effortless way that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than power and control and making sure everyone knew who was in charge. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked him that night, her voice soft against the sound of the party inside, the clinking glasses and fake laughter and deals being made in corners where nobody was watching too closely. "Leaving?" He almost laughed. "Where would I go? This city's in my blood. Has been since I was born. That's not what I asked." She turned to look at him then, really look at him, and something in her eyes made his chest tighten in a way he didn't recognize. "I asked if you ever think about it. About what it would be like to just walk away. Be someone else." He should have lied. Should have given her some smooth answer about duty and loyalty and how a man doesn't abandon his family. But instead he told her the truth. Every damn day. That's when it happened. When the space between them became charged with something he couldn't name, couldn't control, couldn't stop even if he wanted to. She moved closer, or maybe he did. Later he wouldn't be able to remember who closed that final distance. All he knew was that one moment they were two people standing on a balcony, and the next his hand was on her face and her lips were on his, and the whole world narrowed down to that single point of contact. The kiss lasted maybe 10 seconds. Maybe less. But it was enough to change everything. Because what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that she'd come to that party for a reason. Not because she wanted to. Not because her father made her. But because she'd been carrying something in her pocket that had his name written all over it. Something that could destroy him. Something that made that kiss not just forbidden but catastrophically dangerous. He never saw it coming. Never thought to wonder why the daughter of the man who'd spent years trying to bring him down would look at him with anything other than disgust or fear. Never questioned why she seemed to understand him so well, why she knew exactly what to say to make him feel seen. He just kissed her. And in doing so, handed her the one weapon nobody in LA had ever been able to use against him. His heart. That's the kind of moment that leaves a scar you don't see. Not a gunshot, not a betrayal, but a choice that claws at you from the inside. And now I want to know something, from you. If you were him, standing at the edge of everything you built, watching it crumble because of the one person who made you feel alive, what would you do? Drop it in the comments. Would you protect her, or protect your empire? No essays. Just one word. Her empire. Let's see who's honest, and who's built for Los Angeles. He found out on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were always the worst days for bad news in his experience, and this one lived up to the pattern. His tech guy, the one who handled surveillance and counter-surveillance, the one who'd kept him 3 steps ahead of the feds for years, came to him with a flash drive and a look on his face that said, "You're not gonna like this. Boss, we got a problem. A big one." He didn't want to hear it. Didn't want to know. Because some part of him, the part that had been dreading this moment since that first kiss, already understood what was coming. But you don't get to be a mafia boss by hiding from ugly truths, so he nodded and let the guy speak. We tracked the leaks. Traced everything back to the source. And boss. The guy hesitated, loyalty warring with duty. It's not what we thought. She's not feeding information to anyone. She's not talking to the DA. She's not wearing a wire or working with the feds. Relief flooded through him for exactly 2 seconds before the next words came. She doesn't need to. She's got everything already. Has had it for months, maybe longer. Files. Documents. Financial records. Names, dates, locations. Boss, she's got enough evidence to put you away for life. Multiple lives. And it all came from her father's office. The room tilted. Or maybe he did. Hard to tell the difference when your entire world just shifted off its axis. "Show me," he said, his voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside his chest. The tech guy pulled up the files on a laptop. And there it was. Years of work, years of careful planning and covering tracks and making sure nothing could ever touch him. All of it documented, organized, labeled like some kind of prosecutor's wet dream. Account numbers from offshore holdings. Transcripts of conversations he'd had in rooms he'd swept for bugs. Photographs of meetings that never should have been photographed. And the names, Christ, the names. Everyone he'd ever worked with, everyone who'd ever done a job for him, everyone whose loyalty he'd bought or earned or taken by force. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was buried 3 folders deep, in a file marked with just his initials and a date from 10 years ago. The Castellano hit. The one that made him boss. The one that everyone suspected he'd ordered but nobody could prove. The murder that built his empire. She had proof. Concrete, undeniable, career-ending, life-destroying proof. Voice recordings he didn't even know existed. A witness statement from someone he thought was long dead. Physical evidence that connected him directly to the trigger man. How long has she had this? His voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. Best we can tell? Since before she met you. Maybe that's why she met you, boss. I'm sorry. The words landed like body blows. Since before. Since the beginning. Since that first smile, that first conversation, that first moment he'd let himself believe that maybe something good could exist in his life. It had all been a setup. Or had it? His mind raced, trying to reconcile the woman who'd looked at him with genuine affection, who'd touched him like he mattered, who'd made him feel human again, trying to reconcile that woman with someone who'd been carrying his destruction in her pocket the whole time. Has she used it? Shared it with anyone? He needed to know. Needed to understand what game she was playing. That's the weird part, boss. She hasn't. Near as we can tell, she's just sitting on it. Hasn't gone to the cops, hasn't talked to her father about it, hasn't made any moves at all. It's like she's got the nuclear codes and she's just keeping them in a drawer somewhere. That almost made it worse. Because it meant he didn't understand her at all. Didn't understand her motivation, her endgame, her reason for getting close to him in the first place. Was it revenge? Justice? Something else entirely? His right-hand man, who'd been standing silent in the corner, finally spoke up. Boss, we gotta handle this. Tonight. Can't let this kind of threat just walk around out there. You know what needs to happen. You did know. Had known since the moment he saw those files. In his world, there was only one response to this kind of betrayal, this kind of danger. You eliminated the threat. Completely. Permanently. No hesitation, no sentimentality, no second chances. But his hands were shaking. Actually shaking. And that never happened. Not when he'd given orders that sent men to their graves. Not when he'd pulled triggers himself. Not in 20 years of doing things that would make normal people lose sleep for the rest of their lives. Give me a minute, he said. Boss. I said give me a goddamn minute. The room cleared. And he sat there alone with his laptop and his thoughts and the evidence of his own stupidity staring back at him from a glowing screen. She knew everything. Had known from the start. And she'd kissed him anyway. Had looked him in the eye and made him believe that something real existed between them, all while carrying the keys to his cage. But she hadn't used them. Hadn't turned those keys. Hadn't opened that door and thrown him to the wolves. What? His phone buzzed. A text from her. Simple. Innocent. Devastating. Can I see you tonight? Need to talk. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He could ignore it. Could send his guys to her place right now, have it done before sunrise, clean and quick like it had never happened. That's what any smart boss would do. That's what he should do. Instead he typed back, yeah. Where? Our spot. The pier. Midnight. Of course. The pier in Santa Monica where they'd gone after that second meeting, where they'd walked and talked and he'd told her things he'd never told anyone. Where he'd felt, for just a few hours, like a regular person with a regular life. She was giving him a location. Open, public enough to be safe for her, private enough for him to do what needed to be done if he chose to. Was she that naive? Or was she that brave? Or, and this thought made his blood run cold, did she want him to kill her? Was this her way of ending it on her own terms, forcing his hand so she didn't have to live with whatever guilt or conflict was tearing her apart? He looked at the files again. At the evidence that could destroy him. At the proof that she'd been lying, or at least hiding the truth since day one. Then he looked at the text message. At those simple words that somehow carried more weight than all the files combined. Need to talk. His crew was waiting for orders. His empire was bleeding out. His enemies were circling. And the smart play, the only play that made sense, was sitting right in front of him. But when midnight came, he didn't bring his crew. Didn't bring weapons or backup or any of the insurance that had kept him alive this long. He just went. Because he needed to know. Needed to hear her say it. Needed to understand how you could hold someone's destruction in your hands and still look at them like they were worth saving. The pier was empty when he arrived, the ocean stretching out dark and endless beyond the lights. She was already there, standing at the railing, her hair catching the breeze, looking small and fragile and absolutely terrifying. She turned when she heard his footsteps. And the look on her face wasn't fear or guilt or triumph. It was something much worse. It was resignation. Like she'd been expecting this. Like she knew he knew. Like this conversation had been inevitable from the moment they'd first touched. You found them, she said. Not a question. A statement. Yeah. His voice was rough. I found them. She nodded slowly. I figured you would eventually. Your guy's good. Really good. How long? He needed to hear her say it. How long have you had that stuff? Since before we met. My father? He's been building a case against you for 3 years. I had access to everything. Saw everything. She paused, her eyes meeting his. Including the Castellano murder. The one that made you boss. There it was. Out in the open. No more pretending, no more hiding. Just the raw truth standing between them like a third person on this pier. So what's the play? He asked. You gonna take me down? Finally gonna be the good daughter and hand over everything to daddy? Put the bad guy away and feel righteous about it? No. The word was simple, definite. I'm not going to use it. Any of it. He barked out a laugh that had no humor in it. Right. So you just carry around evidence that could put me away forever for fun? That's your hobby? It's my insurance. Her voice cracked slightly. If you come after me, if you decide I'm too dangerous to keep alive, if you do what I know you're probably thinking about doing right now, that evidence goes everywhere. Every news outlet, every law enforcement agency, every person who's ever wanted to see you fall. It all gets released automatically. Smart. Terrifyingly smart. She'd set up a dead man's switch, but for herself. If she disappeared, if something happened to her, his world ended. So this whole time, he said slowly, you've been what? Holding my life hostage. Making me fall for you while you've got a gun to my head. That's not. She stopped, took a breath. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was supposed to get close to you, yes. Supposed to gather information, maybe get you to slip up, say something incriminating. That was the plan. That's why I went to that party. Why I talked to you. Why I. She gestured helplessly between them. Why I started this. But. Because there was definitely a but coming. But I didn't plan on you being. Didn't plan on actually caring. Didn't plan on falling for someone I was supposed to hate. She laughed and it sounded broken. My father raised me to believe people like you are monsters. Pure evil. Beyond redemption. And maybe you are. Maybe everything you've done, all the pain you've caused, maybe that makes you exactly what he says you are. She turned back to face the ocean, her hands gripping the railing. But monsters don't look at me the way you do. Don't talk about wanting to leave, about being tired, about wishing things were different. Monsters don't make me feel safe even when I know I shouldn't. Don't make me question everything I thought I knew about right and wrong. The silence stretched between them, filled only with the sound of waves and distant traffic and two people trying to figure out how to survive a situation that had no good ending. So what now? He finally asked. We just keep going like this? You with your insurance policy, me wondering every day if you're gonna change your mind? She turned back to him and her eyes were wet. I don't know. I don't have an answer. All I know is. She took a step closer. All I know is that if I go down, you're coming with me. If something happens to me, if I disappear, if I end up another unsolved case in this city, everything I know destroys you. Completely. He should have been angry. Should have felt betrayed, manipulated, used, and maybe part of him did. But the larger part, the part that had somehow learned to feel again because of her, understood something else. She wasn't threatening him. She was trying to stay alive. Trying to protect herself from the very real possibility that he'd make the smart choice, the cold choice, the choice that every person in his organization was probably expecting him to make. If I go down, you go down with me, she whispered, and it sounded less like a threat and more like a plea. Like she was begging him to see that their fates were tangled now, that neither of them could destroy the other without destroying themselves. And he didn't respond. Didn't pull out a weapon. Didn't call his guys. Didn't do any of the things a smart mafia boss should do when facing an existential threat. He just looked at her. Really looked at her. At the woman who'd cracked his armor and stolen his heart and put him in an impossible situation where every choice led to ruin. Because now he knew the truth. That kiss on the balcony hadn't been a romantic mistake. It had been the signature on his death warrant. The beginning of an end that had been written the moment she decided to carry his secrets and his heart at the same time. And somehow, standing there on that pier with the ocean at their backs and destruction in their pockets, he realized something that made no sense at all. He wouldn't change it. Wouldn't go back. Wouldn't undo that kiss even knowing what it cost him. Because she'd made him feel alive again. And in Los Angeles, that was worth more than any empire. The silence between them stretched out like the ocean itself. Vast, dark, impossible to cross. He stood there looking at her, this woman who'd become his salvation and his damnation in equal measure, and felt something shift inside his chest. Not breaking. Not shattering. Just changing. Transforming into something he didn't have a name for yet. You should have used it, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Should have taken me down when you had the chance. Before this got complicated. Before we got complicated. I know. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so simple and human it almost broke him. Believe me, I know. My father asks me every week if I have anything new. Every week I lie to him. Tell him I'm still working on it, still getting close, still building trust. And every week it gets harder to look him in the eye. Why? The question came out raw, stripped of all the armor he usually wore. Why protect someone like me? You know what I've done. You've got the receipts, literally. You know I'm not a good man. Not even close. She looked at him for a long moment, the pier lights casting shadows across her face. Because good and bad aren't as simple as my father thinks they are. Because I've seen you with your people, how they're loyal to you not just out of fear but because you actually protect them, take care of their families when things go wrong. Because you told me about your sister, about how you got into this life trying to save her and ended up losing her anyway. Because, don't. He cut her off. Don't make me into something I'm not. Don't give me excuses or redemption arcs or any of that bullshit. I've killed people, destroyed lives, built everything I have on the backs of other people's suffering. I know that too. Her voice was steady now, certain. I'm not trying to redeem you. I'm just trying to explain why I can't be the one to destroy you. Even knowing what it costs me. Even knowing what it makes me. The waves crashed against the pier supports below them, rhythmic and relentless. The city sprawled out behind them, millions of lights representing millions of lives that had nothing to do with the impossible situation they'd created for themselves. He thought about his crew back at the warehouse, waiting for orders. Thought about the council that would demand answers. Thought about the empire that was already crumbling, that would continue to crumble whether he made the hard choice tonight or not. Then he thought about her. About the way she laughed at his terrible jokes. About how she'd held his hand during a moment of weakness he'd never admit to anyone else. About the person he became when he was with her. Not better, maybe, but more honest. More real. I can't protect you, he said, and it felt like admitting defeat. My people know you're a liability. They're already pushing me to handle it. And if I don't, someone else will. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually. I know. She said it so calmly, like she'd already made peace with her own mortality. That's why I set up the insurance. That's why everything goes public if something happens to me. It's not just about protecting myself. It's about protecting you too. From yourself. From making a choice you can't take back. He laughed, bitter and broken. You think I care about that? About protecting myself? No. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, that scent that had become dangerously familiar over the past few months. But I think you care about your people. The ones who depend on you. The families you support. The kids you put through school even though nobody's supposed to know about that. If you go down, they all go down. And I think you care about that more than you care about yourself. Damn her. Damn her for seeing through him. For understanding him in ways nobody else ever had or ever would. So what's the endgame here? He asked. We just exist in this stalemate forever? You holding evidence you won't use, me wanting to protect you from a world that wants you dead. I don't know. And for the first time since they'd started this conversation, she looked scared. Actually, genuinely scared. I don't have a plan. Don't have an answer. All I know is that I can't turn you in, and you can't kill me without destroying everything. We're stuck. Locked together in the worst way possible. Mutually assured destruction, he muttered. That's what this is. We're our own nuclear standoff. Yeah. She smiled, sad and small. Guess that's one way to describe a relationship. The word hung between them. Relationship. As if that's what this was. As if you could call it a relationship when it was built on lies and evidence and the constant threat of annihilation. But maybe that's all relationships were in Los Angeles. Maybe everyone was just holding guns to each other's heads and calling it love. He reached out, slow enough that she could pull away if she wanted, and touched her face. Her skin was warm despite the ocean breeze, and she leaned into his palm like she was starving for the contact. This is gonna end badly, he said. You know that, right? There's no version of this story where we both walk away okay. I know. She covered his hand with hers. But we're already in it. Already too far gone to turn back. So maybe we just see how far we can go before it all falls apart. He should have said no. Should have been smart. Should have done what needed to be done and walked away with whatever pieces of his empire he could salvage. Instead he kissed her. Right there on the Santa Monica Pier with the ocean as witness and the city at their backs and both of their futures hanging by a thread so thin it could snap at any moment. And she kissed him back like she'd been waiting for it. Like despite everything, the evidence, the danger, the impossible situation they'd created, this was the only thing that made sense. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. What do we do now? I don't know, he admitted. And for the first time in his life, not knowing didn't terrify him. Just was. But whatever happens next, we're in it together. For better or worse. Mostly worse, she said with a shaky laugh. Yeah, mostly worse. They stood there for a while longer, two people who should have been enemies holding on to each other like they were the only solid things in a world that had gone liquid and unstable. Eventually, they'd have to leave the pier. Eventually, they'd have to face the consequences of choices that couldn't be unmade. Eventually, reality would crash back in and force them to deal with all the impossible questions that had no good answers. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight they just existed. Two people caught in a trap of their own making, neither willing to let go even though holding on might destroy them both. And somewhere in the city behind them, forces were already moving. His crew making plans. Her father building cases. The machinery of justice and crime grinding toward an inevitable collision that would leave wreckage in its wake. But they didn't know that yet. Or maybe they did and just chose not to think about it. Because sometimes the only way to survive Los Angeles is to live in the moment. To take what you can get while you can get it. To hold on to the person who makes you feel human even when being human is the most dangerous thing you can be. He walked her to her car. Kissed her one more time before she drove away. Watched her taillights disappear into the endless sprawl of the city. Then he got in his own car and sat there in the darkness, engine off, phone buzzing with messages from his crew that he wasn't ready to answer yet. She had the evidence that could destroy him. He had the power to make her disappear. And neither of them could use their weapons without killing themselves in the process. It wasn't love. Not really. Or maybe it was the only kind of love that could exist in a world like theirs, complicated, dangerous, built on a foundation that could crack at any moment. All he knew was that when he'd looked at her tonight, when she'd said, "If I go down, you go down with me," it hadn't sounded like a threat. It had sounded like a promise. A commitment. A twisted version of "till death do us part." And in Los Angeles, that was the closest thing to forever you were ever gonna get. If you think love is the worst thing that can kill a mafia boss, you haven't seen what comes next. There's another chapter waiting in the dark, one that cuts deeper than evidence, sharper than loyalty, and more dangerous than any bullet. Some stories don't end. They just wait for you to catch your breath before they take it away again.